For the Townwide Facilities Committee meeting. The meeting is being recorded by NCM, so you can watch it at your leisure. We have a quorum present, and I know some other members will be here. They're on their way, a little bit of traffic. So I just want to go through the agenda items for tonight. We're really basically down to approving some documents so that you will then authorize me to put together packages for the school committee and the board of selectmen. Based on these documents, I want to review meeting minutes, but when I went through my pack, I see still missing the 9/26 one, so I'll have to get those to you, and we will have to take care of it later. We have the 11/4 meeting minutes, talk about the finances one last time, talk about the org structure and the MOU, and then we have some just timelines indicated when we want to provide the documents to both boards, and if there's anything else that you would like to talk about. So barring anything major, I don't see us meeting for the foreseeable future after this until both boards vote, and we can move forward on the next phase, which would be trying to line ourselves up for a management team beginning July 1st. So with that, in your packet are the November 4th meeting minutes, and if you've had a chance to look at them, anything needing to be corrected?
I'll say motion to approve.
Second.
Any other comments on it?
Nope, no comments.
All in favor?
Pretty
All
friendly to me.
opposed? Nice, unanimous, okay,
Dave Thompson said he's on his way.
okay. That's Myers and Judy, unanimous. Okay, the next thing is the org chart review. I know that we had a little bit of discussion on it. And so what I did was I added on page 2, just indicating in red that additional trade personnel may be proposed after financial analysis is completed. It is the intent to find the most cost-effective way to deal with certain facility costs by understanding if hiring certain trade employees would provide overall savings instead of contracting out the work. The recommendation will be made by the facilities director, general manager, and school superintendent. So, having heard Paul's and some others members' comments, we want to make sure we emphasize that we didn't have time to go through the process like we did with the plumber to say, yes, that is a real cost savings if we brought in a trades personnel. I know we already have that thought in mind for the HVAC, and if we needed others, there are people to do budget analysis, to look at the bills and say, okay, is this the way to go? So as long as we keep it on the forefront, we'll just have to trust that Paul, Tony, and Dave work on the issue when the time comes. And then they'd have to make their case to the boards and then as part of their budget process. So if that's okay with everybody? I'd like to have a vote on the org chart itself to approve for submission into the presentation material for the board of selectmen and the school committee.
Is the superintendent a voting member?
Him and Tony, yes. Do you want to wait?
I would rather wait for
Sure.
any votes until
That's
at
fine.
least one of
Okay.
them come.
That's
Yeah.
fine. No, I have no problem with that.
David, if you wouldn't mind, I'd
Yes.
like to go back a little bit to some of the financial analysis.
Right, so I was gonna get to that, right? Is that on did I skip over that by mistake?
No,
Yes, I did.
I just,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, finances was supposed to be first, before the org charts. So Molly sent me, what you have is, she sent to me last week, the corrected file.
yeah, I saw her corrections, and so
Okay.
then but I wanted to share what I had found.
Okay,
So,
that's fine. Hey, Dave.
I'm gonna pass these down.
Thank you.
I think I have, I don't have one for Dave, but he got one last night. So I just wanted to share with everybody that I took what Molly did, and then I was able to answer the questions that I had
Okay.
before. She helped pull out some of the information about what was and, you know, on the general government side, what would get pulled into facilities. And then she helped with the analysis of, you know, the 3 scenarios of kind of leaving everything status quo, making a shared department where facilities gets kind of first dibs, or making it a third department. So I looked at kind of like, the tricky thing, of course, in this is it's one thing to make it all work in the first year, but then no system is going to be perfectly lined up for 3 years because each thing grows at different rates and
Correct.
based on those projections. But this was really helpful information. The one thing that Molly's analysis didn't do is it didn't look at utilities costs compared to other facilities costs. And so I wasn't able to pull that out directly from the projections, but what I did do is I went back to the FY19 budget book and looked at that. And in that year, utilities were roughly 50% of the facilities type costs for general government.
Okay.
On the school side, our utilities are roughly 30% of our school facilities spend, of our projections for school facilities. But snow and ice was included in the schools' facilities, and they aren't really included in the general government
That's right.
facilities because
It's not broken out.
Right, and that's like the
It's Prego, it's all in Mark Ryan's roadway, everything.
right,
else.
right, and certainly plowing all of the streets in Norwood wouldn't be part of the facilities department. That's part of the DPW, and so I think that's part of the reason why there's that discrepancy. But I think also the schools have just invested more in you know, maintenance of the schools and things like that than the general government have, which is exactly why we're talking about doing something like this. So overall, if you look at school utilities compared to general government utilities, ours are about twice what the general government is, which makes sense because we have some really large buildings, right? We don't have a 24-hour-a-day building like this police and fire, but the high school is really large. And the middle school and the Savage and the Willett are all electric buildings, which is not the most
Not helpful, yep.
most efficient way. So anyway, so based on that, then on the second page, I kind of went through the questions and said, you know, because this was what I wanted to do, was set up these 3 scenarios and then sort of test it with different scenarios. So I went through and said, you know, what happens if there's an increase in operating money put to small capital projects? What if there's a significant increase in utilities costs? What happens if revenues drop? And what happens if we kind of achieve some energy efficiencies? And I think based on, you guys can look at some of the findings here, but the general thing is, I think we as a group had decided that the facilities made sense as a third department.
Right.
That would be on the same level in the budget process with the schools and the general government. And in that case, it seemed like that seemed, even with these
Even
4
if-
scenarios, that seemed to be the most fair and the most, so that gave me confidence that in the financial things. So,
I think you're absolutely right, and if it was part of the shared, I think everyone would get hurt from some particular scenario.
Exactly.
Whereas this one, I think you're not gonna, your programs are your programs, and the field is gonna have to say, hey, how do we do this?
absolutely.
So that's fine. The other thing, I just want to comment on the snow, because of the issue, and I had a long discussion with Tony about trying to break out, even going forward, snow costs just for the facilities, and that's going to be extremely hard to do. Because it's mostly drop in, make 2 plow runs out of the parking lot and get out. How do you deal with that? So it may end up being that all snow belongs to the DPW.
Well,
And
when
then,
you,
and then facilities won't have to worry about it. It'll be Mark Ryan's responsibility to ensure, and if Paul says, hey, you need to get up to the Willett, you know, Mark sends a truck up to the Willett without a big deal, rather than having Mark deal with roadways in some parking lots, and then Paul trying to deal with other parking lots. If we could just have one, I think there would be a better, operationally, it would be better to do that. So I think that's probably the direction Tony would go when he drafts up a budget. Instead of having 2 separate snows, it'd just be 1 snow and a list of buildings that would have to be dealt with. So just want to let everyone know what Tony was thinking, because we can't, if we wanted snow under the facilities, you really can't do it on the general government side, because it's all built in when they do the contracts. It's all one for roadways and parking lots, and his folks try to deal with the parking lots right away. And how do you carve out the fire department
You
one.
do, well, you
so-
do have, the airport has their own snow line.
Yes, they do.
But they've got their runways and all the
They've got
rest,
their
which you've
runways,
got to pull that out, because you can't compare doing runways with.
And Charlotte has her own,
Yes,
but
and
Charlotte, as of
does-
this year, is
right.
not. She's
And-
been
and she doesn't.
incorporated into Mark.
And I think when you look
Which
at
is
some
good.
of the other buildings, you'll see that, like, the current light department at 206 Central doesn't have a parking lot per se. All of the employees park in the general lot, the public lot that's right here. And several of the other buildings, they don't really have what the schools have, which is you have much larger parking areas where you've got to take care of it.
Right.
So these buildings, Town Hall, really, the main parking lot is the one right here next to the building, which does only need one swipe in, one swipe out. The second lot is actually public parking.
That's right.
So that's why it falls under Mark Ryan. The COA falls under you guys, I think, up at the Savage Center.
Actually know who.
I think,
The
I
upper
think
lot
Paul does
there.
do it. I think
Yeah.
that-
Right,
I think
so,
it's
you're absorbing some of that cost, which is
Right.
actually general gov. So it does make sense to just put everything under one area, call it snow, for the buildings that do have the parking lots.
You okay with that?
Yeah,
Thought
but
process.
you're not including the airport in that one.
Not the runway, no, now they're having a new parking area with the new SRE building being outfitted. So
Okay.
up at the top of the hill there's gonna be a small parking area there. But for the runway itself, you can't
Right,
build
right.
that in
No, no,
any way.
no.
Oh,
So,
building? The new building has a small parking lot upper that meets the first floor as opposed to the ground floor area.
Which may get done by Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're gonna,
You mean the light
That's an-
department building?
no.
The
the,
No,
airport
the airport office,
SRE.
the new office
Okay,
building.
no,
Right.
I
has-
thought Judy meant the light department.
That's what I meant, the light
Oh,
department.
The new light
the
department.
The light
new,
department.
right, you're gonna have to look at that as well as one of the
Right.
buildings that's
Because that
included.
could become pretty,
That's an area that hadn't been considered before, because that's got a
Right,
pretty
it wasn't.
large, and you've got the indoor parking now, so you're gonna have the driveway that has to go in and around, so that's gonna be more of an area. Right now, light department really doesn't have a plowing area.
whoever does the airport could do that, I suppose.
Right.
Good.
The one thing about our schools is, it's not just plowing the parking lots and the driveways. I think our custodians spend a fair amount of time clearing walkways.
Right.
Yeah.
We have,
And that's pretty standard, so even on the general government side, each building custodian, so that's why I think the divide
but
line
I
is
feel like
probably.
we have a lot more, like, because we have.
Oh, sure.
You know, and, you know, like at the Prescott, there's a pathway that goes not
To
out the front,
Deerfield.
but it goes out to Deerfield, you know, and
so
that's.
they'll
a-
still be doing the same thing
Yeah.
that they're doing right now.
Right, so for both sides of the house right now, custodians are responsible for the sidewalks and the stairways leading up to the buildings and going out to the parking lots, and that's it. And then Mark would take it over from there.
So is the idea, though, that as a budgetary matter, we bring all snow and ice under one heading, aside from the airport? I mean, is that what we're proposing?
That's the lean.
And it goes
Just from
under-
an operational, instead of having two individuals responsible, Paul and Mark, it would just be easier to say, give it to Mark, and just have Paul identify if there's an issue going on at any building, you know, he can call him.
But
So I don't-
typically, the schools have, our snow and ice budget winds up being divided up into our plowing contractors and then our overtime for our custodians to shovel the walkways and get
Right.
out there with snow blowers and things
Right.
like that. So I think that would still be under Paul, because those custodians report to Paul.
Yes, I'm just
So
trying
there
to
would
separate
still
parking
need to
lots
be
versus
some,
walkways, yeah.
right,
That's
right.
it.
But I think there would still need to be some snow and ice money in facilities for walkways, because that is sometimes
Right.
a
Well, I think
significant
it's-
source of overtime.
I think basically it's one of the things to study as we're,
Yeah,
you know, into the
In the
first
one-year
stage.
trial?
And we're talking
Yeah.
about, you know, before we start moving the money around, because, you know, another piece is, we don't have enough equipment to clear all of our parking lots, so we
No, you
we
do a
hire out.
contracting.
Right, we've
Right.
got several contractors who come in.
Yep.
You know, what's the long-term plan for that? To use contractors, very well might. You know, Or is it?
but we don't have the town itself does not have the personnel to
Right.
deal with all the snow, so.
Right.
I think that's something that I think when Mark develops a snow plan, he'd have to sit down with, you know, Paul, Tony, and you to say, this is how we're handling snow this year for the different buildings and how would they get at, so.
And then
So
they can
it-
do some continuation of some of the contracts you have with people.
Yeah, I don't think
So just to take it to another conclusion, then clearing walkways on school buildings would have to be, just as it would under facilities,
Yes.
clearing parking lots, however, could go under DPW. Is that what we're
That's-
thinking
That's
here?
what I think.
That's the intent. That's the
Okay,
intent.
which means that clearing walkways by facilities has to go into the facilities budget. And the snow, and now, clearing school parking lots, which is under the school department budget, now goes under DPW. DPW takes care of all the rest.
Right.
All right.
Well, you know, at least in theory right now, the snow experts are not sitting at the table. Just for the record.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So as much time as I spend with snow and making snow decisions, the snow experts are not here.
We're not trying to snow, we're not trying to snow it, right?
We can run it past a bit, Paul and
Well, no,
Mark too,
I
but it sounds
will be
like,
talking to the snowmasters to
Yeah.
determine
Yes,
whether we're
yeah.
having school or not.
Yeah.
Right, right, sometimes I do what I'm told.
Lots of snow days this year, right?
So if it's
So
okay, I'd like to
that's
ask.
something that would have to be addressed.
Right, and they will. I mean, it's gotta be fleshed out a little bit, but I think if you do that as the drawing line, that the custodians handle what they handle today, and that falls into facilities.
Right.
And then parking lots.
Contractors.
you're gonna pay it one way or another. Someone's-
Right, we're just trying to.
Just figure out how we
What's the
control
best way
it.
to do it operationally? The costs are gonna be the cost, so. But I would like to have someone move that our recommendation for a third budget be adopted by the school committee and the board of selectmen.
On behalf of you and I, Mr. Chairman, I'll move that. I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
You and me, I'm sorry, not you and I.
Any further discussion? So we're voting for a recommendation of a third budget, so you end up with the schools, general government, and facilities going forward. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous. Okay, that's great. Now we go back to the org chart. So Dave, just before you dropped in, I did add what Paul asked regarding consideration of additional employees if the need arises. So I think on page 2,
That, on page 2? Yeah,
Yeah,
and that
there's
is, I mean, that's actually a concern of mine.
Yeah.
I mean, we have buildings and ground staff, and they are, you know, we have old buildings, and they are, you know, overdrawn, just keeping up the 9 places we have now, and now we're gonna talk about
Right.
adding others. So that is definitely a concern, whether there actually would be enough bodies to really do it well.
well, I think to Tony's point last time, the resources are there. I mean, currently, all the work, or most of the work on the general government side is contracted out, and that's not gonna go away until we get to a point where we can analyze whether between both the school work and the town work would justify adding a tradesperson, or whether we just continue on. We did that for the plumber, Paul and I, and that's how we came up with, okay, let's add a plumber, because we're spending, significant amount of money between both budgets for it. That analysis has not taken place for any other trades.
It actually
So-
has for electrical.
Yeah,
What
like-
else?
I did a
Well, we had-
review of all of the electrical, I didn't print it up unfortunately, and did a review of not only just the hours that were calculated out, because Sanibel, who was our electrician, he billed us out by hours, and the materials. So I do have a breakdown of it. I only have rough notes here, and it looked like labor was running us about 45,000 in FY '19, 48,000 in FY '18. And then, like I said, I don't have my paperwork here, I gotta grab it off of my computer. But it was under $50,000 in labor for electrical,
Do I
which is kind of
assume
surprising.
a position would be far more money?
If that's all the labor cost is, then yes, you're gonna pay more than that.
That was
Right.
all- that
I
was-
took,
that was
yeah, and I went
contracted
to
out.
every invoice that was paid to Sanibel, physically took every invoice, checked their hours, the cost was $80 an hour was what they were billing out, took any apprentice work that was being done when they needed a second person, count that out as well.
So
And we came
45 was
under-
FY what, 17?
Like I say, this is just my pencil work here,
That's okay.
but it looked like it was roughly 45,000 in
Yeah.
FY '19.
19, okay.
And that came
48.
to about 623 hours
Okay.
That's combined, both the master and the apprentice. And then FY '18 was 48,000, and that was combined 527 hours. That's FY '18.
So that's something over this next year, which is, I call it phase one, is that what we're calling it? That will flush itself out, and then we'd be able to put it in the FY
21.
21.
21.
21 budget
Yep.
to either.
No.
22.
22.
22, right.
Because we're in FY
We're gonna work on
Sorry,
21,
sorry.
yeah.
And that would be
22.
part of the first third budget.
Sorry about that.
And in there, if it required hires, it would be part of asking for additional positions with the
Right.
money.
Right, and still, you know, it doesn't sound like much. What we also did is I pulled out any that were special projects. If we're replacing all the LED, you know, the light bulbs with LEDs, and we hired Sanibel to do it. That is not part of this, because we would hire a contractor to do a huge project if we're
Right.
doing a building. So this was
Even for
strictly
the
your
schools, we
maintenance
would
and
do that too.
repairs.
So I-
Right, for any of it. So I was surprised that it wasn't as many hours as I really thought that it would be. Materials, I think, is where you're paying a lot of the money.
Yeah.
And we have a markup of, I think it was either 5 or 7% markup off the trade book, but we're really paying it in the materials. So on the purchasing end of it, that's where we'll start to work with the energy person that we're gonna come in to find out what kind of new materials we can buy, so we can reduce our materials costs.
And hopefully standardizing too, so you reduce the types of
Right.
fixtures.
Yeah, and
that
we
you're
have,
getting that will
your
help us,
buildings have a
so.
lot of old ballasts and things, so do ours. And as we get to the new modern LED ballasts, hopefully,
That'll
they're,
go away.
they're expensive to buy in the beginning, but the amount of time that they should last is a lot longer, so we won't be replacing them as often.
I think Paul's concern, the way I heard it, was the resources are on the town side, but he's the guy they're gonna call. He's the guy that's gonna satisfy getting there on time, you know, do a triage and all that. And he's afraid that even though we got the resources somewhere, it's not gonna be there quick enough for him in order to give the service to the people that have high expectations, because we're doing this. Is that sort
Yeah,
of,
and the, you know. and-
wrap that up?
Right, and, you know, and the schools, you know, we have an excellent facilities manager, and we have a very dedicated staff, but for, you know, we're talking about adding 2 people from the beginning, am I correct with that? So we're replacing the electrician, or we're adding the operations manager.
Right, so we're still keeping an electrician position. We would be adding a plumber probably right up front, and then ease into an HVAC person we have in the future. So I think as we get into some of the projects that we want to do next year, would be an opportune time to say, maybe we should bring someone on board to look at our interests on some of these HVAC projects, instead of relying on the vendor to look after
Yeah.
themselves.
I strongly believe that HVAC is really where we need to go. That's where our costs really are. The plumbing contract tends not to be even as much as the electrical. Jacobs Plumbing is our contractor, and we're not spending the money on plumbing the way we do on electrical. But on HVAC for all of the buildings, that is really huge.
So in terms of urgency, it's HVAC, electric, plumbing.
You'd have to talk to Paul on
Yeah.
his end, on the general gov
On the government
end.
side.
Well,
General gov
the
side.
replacement of the electric, yeah,
it's-
sorry, good.
Right, but on the general gov side, for us, we're spending most of our money, a good deal of money on HVAC, the electrical, and then plumbing is
Yeah.
minor for us.
Okay,
Paul wants a plumber first.
all right.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
because
and the
we-
idea is that you will eventually have those
Right.
people working.
At the end of the day, the intent is to have an electrician, you already have, you already have a carpenter, an HVAC, and a
Right.
plumber. And then if we even have to add to that, I mean, we just go through a cost analysis to find out. So like right now, we're proving adding another electrician's probably not worth it, but we don't know in 5 years what,
Right.
what the situation is
But that
gonna
could
be.
be a laborer to assist the electrician.
Right, that
be.
was,
Or a
Right.
general laborer to assist the
That's
plumber
right.
or
Yep.
the HVAC.
when I spoke, when Paul called me to tell me he wasn't gonna be able to attend the meeting today, I asked him, I said, I know that you had wanted a couple of new positions, and what are you looking for? He said at that time, he is looking for a couple of laborers, not licensed, like, you know, at some point it would be.
Not tradesmen.
It'd be appropriate to bring in tradesmen once we do full analysis, but he thinks there's need for some more boots on the ground, you know? And, so he was looking for a couple of general laborer positions.
In phase one?
in phase one.
Okay.
More like the handyman who can take care
I
of the
think
door
he's-
locks and can take care of the smaller things that we're trying to find people, contractors on the outside to do when there isn't time to do it.
So again, I think our note is appropriate because then Paul can spend that time working with you, Kathy, to look at what we've been spending to see if it's worthwhile and cost-effective to bring in, you know, one or two laborers and say, so, I mean, these positions have to be accounted for, so we're either gonna save it on the contractor end.
Right.
So, okay.
But in this phase one, it's not expected that we would pull from the schools to do something at the town hall. It's
No.
basically going to stay in place with Paul and the ones that are transferred to orchestrate, shall we say, the request. And if it's a town side, he's got to have the resources. He goes to Tony or you to get the authorization to get a contractor in here to get that thing done. That's how I see this.
So I think in terms of budget, I agree that if there's a need in town hall, that has to be funded from a general government budget, and if there's a need at the Savage Center, that has to be funded from a school budget. I think he's hoping that there may be some room to do a little bit of cross stuff, that if the town has some electrical need that, and we have an
And that would be
electrician on
his
staff, that, you know, but that's his call.
His call, because he knows what resources he has, what they're capable of, and what he has for time. And we
We're
don't get
talking
into
about the
those things.
transition period here anyway,
Right.
right? Which
Right.
is short-term,
Management.
relatively
Management.
short-term.
Management, right.
Management.
That'll work out. We'll
I
make
think
it
it'll
work.
work out. I don't, so. All right, I'll accept the motion that we recommend the 11/5/2019 org chart as submitted for submission to the Board of Selectmen and School Committee.
Which one is that? That's page
11/5/19, well, it's 5 pages, so,
Okay, so page two.
well, it's all 5 pages.
All 5 pages.
Oh, all five.
I added that note.
all
I
five.
It's all
added-
the same
I
thing,
added
it's
that
just-
note on page 2 after our last,
Oh, okay.
last
All
meeting's discussion.
I apologize if I walked in late, maybe I already
It's okay.
said it. So the two positions, the two laborers are not initially included. Your note is that it will be assessed.
Right, because we haven't, based on the timing, because we have not had time to do a cost analysis to say, is there savings or not?
Okay.
But since we're not transitioning budgets for next year, I think we really have a year and a half now to deal with, let's look at what we're spending.
Yep.
And is there a recommendation to hire?
Okay.
Or just continue to contract out? And we just went
The
through.
resources are there right now in the budget. It's just not the way Paul would like to do it.
Right.
We'd like to have it in the long term. We'd like to have them on the payroll.
Yep.
But the resources are there to move anything in there to support, to authorize Paul to go ahead and do the service.
And where are those resources coming from?
The general
From the
government.
town
Right,
side.
okay, and
Right.
is that written somewhere, that
Well-
we do this and then those positions are identified as being needed, but the resources are coming from the general government?
Well, for this first year, since budgets
year.
aren't moving, we're.
Right, but if there were two new positions, correct? Am I understanding this correctly? So if we're not going into this with an agreement that they're definitely going to be there, but we're saying it's gonna be assessed as part of this process.
Yes.
Yep.
And then if Dave, Tony, Paul, everybody says, yes, we need it, where is the resources coming from at that?
Well, that'll
point?
be up to Dave and Tony to make that as part of their budget presentation, to say this is.
Well,
what we're
that's for
gonna get
FY
that.
'22.
But that's for
right.
FY '22, I'm not.
But my point is, so maybe we should jump ahead a little bit and talk about what we said about the MOU when we were meeting at the school committee last night. Because
Okay.
I think that our concerns as, the school committee's concerns about the MOU kind of relate to this. So I was suggesting a couple of edits to the MOU.
Okay.
Overall, I would like to see an annual review provision in the MOU, and I think we've talked about this, that this is not meant to be a document that's set in stone, it's something that we can keep talking about. But I just thought, so that everybody's on the same page, it would be helpful if maybe we said something like, each year, the director of facilities, of the facilities department, the superintendent, the general manager, and representatives from the Board of Selectmen and the school committee shall meet to discuss the function of the facilities department and to suggest revisions to the MOU if appropriate. Any amendments to the MOU must be approved by both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee.
Before you answer, I want to ask you a question. Do you see this committee dissipating once the facilities management department is created, or do you see that as the place
see it-
for
I see it
them
going-
to go to and saying,
No, I see it going away.
Okay.
Because the appointing authority resides with the two major boards, school
Right.
and it's been an interim function. This committee has served an interim function of taking us from one point and transition this to another, but it should be sunsetted, I think. So the amendment provision would be, I think, it's funny you mention that, because I think that, I don't think is addressed. There should always be an amendment provision anyway.
Right,
It should
right.
usually be the last thing you
This is,
have.
I don't know if I have
you know.
enough copies for everybody, because I made extra copies for school committee last night. Yeah.
I have
Okay.
mine memorized.
As for annual review, I mean, if you feel it's necessary, certainly in the early years, I suspect that if this goes well, 20 years from now, we're not holding annual reviews, the
Well,
department
right,
just
and
exists.
so if, 4 years in the future, one of the amendments to the MOU is let's get rid of this annual review, then I leave that to the wisdom of the people 4 years from now. But I think, I believe it would give comfort to the school committee and probably to the Board of Selectmen as well, that, we're just saying like, hey, we're gonna talk about this every year.
Yeah.
And don't forget the finance committee, we're not looking to approve it, we actually approve it by having it in our budget.
Right.
Because we're the only ones that can present the budget, so there is an approval process that we weigh in on in that whole scenario of the budget formation and presenting it to town meeting.
Do you think it would be appropriate for the FinCom to participate in sort of the annual review? Or, certainly you could.
Can I don't mean to jump things here, but that's probably not necessary.
I agree.
I mean, the Finance Commission puts the budget together anyway.
Right.
They're sort of gonna be like looming in the background waiting anyway, so I think, really, this is an operational and managerial function here, I think, and the two boards and the leaders of the two wings, I think, are really the critical pieces. If we're going to do, I don't have any objection to it, by the
I don't
way,
either.
it's
Okay.
fine.
Number one.
So then,
I will add that in there.
okay, great. And then the other thing, which is the one that relates more to the org chart, is I think since we're talking about a phase one that isn't managing all the budgets and stuff like that, then it was appropriate to call out a few things. One is that the facilities department management will be housed at the Savage Center. The school department will fund salaries for the director and the administrative assistant at the current funding levels. Or maybe that becomes the business manager. I'm not really sure what the title of that is, and I wanted to check with Paul, and he's not here, so we can check with him. And that the general government budget will include salaries for the 2 new positions, and he was looking for licensed, unlicensed laborers, plus additional money for a salary increase for the director to reflect the increase in responsibilities for the director. So I just wanted to kind of call out, if we're gonna start this July 1, what is each side bringing to the table?
Right, on the general government, it said will include salaries for the 2 new positions, that's the laborers,
That's what we were
and that's
proposing.
what,
I
at
don't
this
think we can
point-
agree to that. I don't think that we
Okay.
have, until we can actually have an analysis done, I don't think we can determine how many people we're gonna add. I think we're committed to, based on the org chart, we've already hired an energy manager that's gonna work for both the schools and, we'll look at globally for all the town, halftime. Paul wants to upgrade his current admin assistant, or if I have her position title correct, to either the business analyst or the business manager. I guess that'll have to be between him, Dave, and Tony. So I do agree that the increase in salary would come from general government, because the reason why is he's being asked to take care of the general guy side of the buildings. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with, for the first year, being housed at the Savage Center. I don't think anyone was looking in year 1 to move it and waste time. We'd gotta have this
Right.
dive right
Well, you got a
into
place to
this,
put 'em,
and we don't. So that's fine too. It's just that, I just don't see right now where we can definitely say that general government's gonna fund 2 new positions. I just don't.
Well, I just like.
I understand, and I,
Our facilities director is telling us that the way he thinks this would work is if he has that. And
But you
so,
don't have any responsibility on the government side, the schools.
but we don't want to set our facilities director up to fail.
Good point.
So.
Right, I understand, but
Good point.
where do you, I mean, how are things handled today that we think it's gonna fail? I mean, if certain labor is required, then it's one of the department heads who will call and either say to Tony or Kathy, you need me to bring somebody to do something over here. It's not gonna change, except instead of
It's usually
calling
me.
Kathy, they're gonna call Paul and say, Paul, I need it, as long as he has his vendor list at the table and says, okay, this is who you call, and that's why one reason we went through and developed that vendor list by building, by trade, is he would know, or maybe in the future she would know, who to call and deal with. So that's not gonna disappear just because,
Well, I thought it was also mentioned that in the first year, pretty much the building managers in general gov were going to, we weren't, like I said, I said to Tony, that means July 1 I can walk away, and he was like, no. So the building managers are still gonna be me and Charlotte and, you know, the fire
It's gonna
chief.
be transition.
For the first year, so there is no real additional cost, because if something goes wrong, if it's something big, yeah, I'm gonna talk to, my understanding is I'm gonna talk to Paul, but if it isn't, and I gotta get a window fixed, I'm gonna get my contractor in that I would use for my window and get it done. I mean, maybe we need more of a description on
yeah,
that, but,
Because if he's gonna be the facilities manager, my understanding was the management was in the trial phase, so that the management would be the management. But,
I don't wanna say trial phase, can we not call it a trial? I mean,
Phase
got it,
one.
if you wanna call it phase one, that's fine, or year one.
Phase A,
Okay.
phase, you know, we didn't
Right.
like the dating scenario, so I won't go there again. So, but, you know, so in that, so the, you know, we were going to put the management in place, but keep the budget separate,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
So, you know, obviously the school's concern is, because we're not into that third budget yet, but that money's gotta come from somewhere to put that management, you know, oversight. And if the other two people are not, you know, we were talking about from the beginning, hiring two people to be part of that management piece. So the, you know, so the question is, I mean, we can probably talk about the phrasing of that, but where's that money coming from? So,
It's already,
Can I, Judy, can I suggest that, we're talking about year one here, right?
Yes.
Because in year two, we have the third budget anyway.
Right.
And we go back to whatever was split between the other two wings is gonna be
Right.
what it is, and presumably more or less in perpetuity or whatever. But, so that third, now we have, instead of 4 great big departments, we'll have 5, you know, light, shared, school, general, and now facilities. Is it, for year one, is this a ridiculous idea to suggest you just do it with reserves? Because if you think that's ridiculous, I got a lot more ridiculous ideas I can come up with.
Well, and it
Do what
could
with
be,
reserves, though? We-
I
We're
mean,
talking
right
about funding the
now-
2 positions.
but right now, we're working
No, you
on
can't do that, I
fiscal '21 budget.
Right.
It is time to put in positions to be hired, to be effective next July 1. We could do that.
right.
However, if we've got a history here that we can't justify it, especially with the benefit package, but we can supply the service through the funding mechanisms that we use now, that's another approach. And I don't think there's enough information on the table to determine that.
So maybe it needs to be language that has a certain dollar amount associated with it, right? Like the equivalent of 2 positions, and if maybe in the beginning, Paul's doing more calling in contractors when he needs that, and he's got access to the budget line items for the various buildings to do that, but that he has the flexibility to say, no, now's the time to pull these and make it a position.
And your reason for proposing it this way is that in year one, because it's only 1 year in the history of the town, we have to worry about it, but you said we don't want to go into budget season and then all of a sudden realize we're supposed to hire 2 people, we don't have any money left to hire them.
Right.
And now the whole plan that we've worked on for 2 years is in jeopardy. Okay, all right.
Not to speak for Paul, he feels really responsible for this. And coming out of this is going to be important to supply that service right away. Because if we don't, it's going to get messy as we move forward. And he wants that control. He wants the control, and having the person, he'd be able to control it. So I understand that. However, there are extenuating circumstances here as far as where the money is now. Of course, it can be pulled together for 21. So that's where I think we are. I mean, we're willing to have all the funds necessary, but it's the how-tos, whether we hire 2 people or whether we continue.
And I think, as Tom said, now is the time to have this discussion. I mean, we can discuss whether or not it actually needs to be in the MOU, but there has to be some sort of agreement because it's almost budget season. It's already almost Thanksgiving, and, you know, the schools and the general government are going to be putting together their budgets starting in January. And so if we haven't figured out what each of us are bringing to the table to make this work July 1,
But,
it's going to be too late later.
Go ahead, Ann,
I
good.
think I have a solution. Okay, we're gonna start a new budget for 21. So when we do that, the amount of money that would have normally have been Paul's payroll will be contributed by the school.
Yes.
We have a contribution going to come from general government. I suggest that we start with a line item for salaries for Paul and whoever is reporting directly up to him. And that the monies that normally, when we did our split, would come from general government and go into that line item to make up the difference. And if you needed 2 more people or however you do it. But we do a section and call it the facilities budget. The rest of the things all come as normal in the budget.
So you set up the budget the first year?
Are you
So, do you understand what
No,
I'm
just for
saying?
the management people.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a little confused here, but.
Yeah.
Okay,
So what you're
Not
proposing really is,
what you're saying, not what you're saying. I think we're mixing,
so we're doing for 2021, when we start making the budget.
Phase 1.
Phase 1, we are doing the, what is it, 57-43 split, whatever we're doing this year. So we do our split. Paul's money goes like it normally, you know, however much you would put in for
Yep.
Paul's salaries, goes into a newly created line item called facilities management, salaries. The other monies that would be contributed by the general government to the support of the people that are going to be working in 2021 for the facilities will also be put into that budget.
so in other words, you've created the
You've now
budget in the
created
first year, not the
third-
second year.
The first part of the third
You're gonna
budget.
fund it out of reserves
But
anyway.
you fund it
You
out
will?
of your 55-45 split.
Or we could do that, or we could, maybe there can be a new line item on the general government side, that's their facilities line item.
Yeah.
That isn't any of the individual buildings, but they have a facilities line item.
he is gonna create his own facilities. He is gonna
Right.
consolidate for the
Okay.
upcoming budget. He
And
is
so
gonna
then
put all the
that-
costs, all the
Right.
utilities, he is gonna put it so that when we go the following year, where we mix the budgets, it's just much easier.
Okay.
You don't
So
have to
this
deal
is
with
just a
the.
tracking two budgets to put them together under the facilities.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not gonna pretend to be the, you know, biggest munis expert, but I don't know how difficult, you know, creating that third budget will be in this year right now for next year, based on
Yeah, well,
multiple
we weren't gonna
projects
do it.
going on at
We weren't
once,
gonna
so-
do it.
Right.
It's
we-
the,
part-
it's
part
the
of the
following
reason-
year.
Part of the reason for not going to a third budget was
Yes.
because
Okay.
this is
Yes.
a transition.
Although
It
I'll
is
say-
Still transitioning, we'll say.
It, for my end, where I'm overseeing most of the general government buildings right now and consolidating everything, it would be easier if I had everything for FY '21, or even, if I could have done it this year, it would have been great to have all my building money together, because now when I go to take care of the problems I have to, I've got to go to the fire chief and say, can you approve this? Can you approve that? When
That's
really
what
I'm
Paul doesn't
overseeing
want
it.
Right.
Right, and so, like you say, if in '21, if you had all of the building money for all of the general general gov, just for 1 year even, all stuck together. So when you go to FY '22, year 2, you say, here's general gov's portion, here's school, we're putting it together, now we're ready to go.
I believe
Yeah.
that's
And then
Tony's
there's a single-
intention.
Right.
Tony's intention is to,
Right.
even though we're not combining budgets
Right.
beginning next July, he
Yeah.
wants to have a
Right.
general
And-
government
Yeah.
one, and then you have the school one.
And that
So
would
the
give
following year it's
Paul,
much
that would
easier.
give Paul so much easier for him to manage the general gov portion if everything having to do with buildings is in that one department, if you want to call it that, so that public safety, town hall, and everything is all lumped together with line items that say, this is what we were figuring for town hall, for public safety. Here it is, here are the two, and then for phase 2, we grab
Put 'em
them both together. But then we can actually track, general gov has been doing this in this year in one place and not look at 5 different buildings to find out what we spent on HVAC, what we spent on
But that
everything.
doesn't answer the question about the 2 new positions,
I
though,
I just
does
think
it?
that's,
Well,
it's
it
out
does,
of,
it does, because you can, general government's 45%, you fund those 2 positions.
but I'm not
However-
disagreeing with that, but that's no different than trying to identify if we need another electrician, another plumber, another HVAC, a laborer. And I just think that calling out 2 positions without knowing what they are in the first year, because this says for first year, I don't think we should be saying we're gonna fund 2 positions. We don't know what those 2 positions are. We
Paul's
don't
saying
know-
he wants to hire 2 laborers.
But there still has to be a cost analysis to identify that it's value, it's cost effective for the town to do it. If we're only spending $25,000 on labor services, where's the justification to hire an employee?
I can't answer that
I know
question.
that,
I don't
that's what
think
I'm
we
saying.
can have this conversation. I mean, I wish Tony were here so that he could weigh in on this, and I really don't think that this, as me, I can't, you know,
Okay,
kind of.
but why would
I
it be
was-
different than anything else that's being called out at the bottom of
The last
page 2?
meeting, my understanding, and there was a lot of different discussions going on, but what I took away from that last meeting was Paul was very clear in meeting the 2 laborers. And I heard Tony say, and I wish Tony was here and we could rewatch the meeting, but I heard Tony say, we'll figure it out, it'll come out of the general government's budget. And that's part of why we're asking for it in writing, because if it's stated and some people are thinking this is what's being done and then it's not. But I do know that the school committee, because we went over a lot of this last night, what you see in front of you as Maya's proposed additions, the school committee felt very comfortable and confident with this language going into the MOU. And if it was in the MOU, I think overall everybody was completely ready to vote last night, if we had like that final draft. I do think if we don't know where that funding is coming from.
But this is
that's
the
gonna be
town
very
side, you're not, you know, the school side's all taken care of, right?
Well, except for the fact that our facilities director is telling us that he's not comfortable taking on this additional responsibility
I'm with-
without
I'm with
without
Paul,
that
by the way.
support. And so it's true that the schools would have money for their projects, except for the fact that if our facilities director is now struggling with something because he's not getting adequate
Oh,
support,
I see.
then that's going to trickle down to the schools, even if it's not. It doesn't mean that the schools can't get a plumber to come in, but it's just, you know, what the schools are bringing to the table and what the general government is bringing to the
Right.
table, and it seems like there's clearly confusion because
No, so I don't think it's
you understood
confusion.
one thing, Teresa understood another. Paul's asking for
No, I know,
things, you
I'm not
So I just
disagreeing that he
wanted
asked
to-
for it. I understand that he asked for it. The question is, it was at the 11th hour they asked for, we've been going at this now for 18 months, and you brought it up after 17 months. That's one thing. But 2 is, he talked about having the resources available to do his job. And all we're saying is on the general government side, he will have the resources.
So
We've had-
how are you going to guarantee that? What language
Because
would
the
you
funding is there,
propose?
because it's
How
not.
much funding would be there? Because as the general government comes up with their budget, the school committee has no control over that, right? You guys make decisions about where money's gonna be allocated. So what we're asking for in this is a statement from general government that you're going to commit to a minimum level of funding for these roles. And you're not gonna, you know, we're committing to a minimum level of funding for this, and we'd ask general government what they're willing to, and then we would ask Paul if he feels it's adequate.
So there's 2 things on our side. One is, it's a fair request. One is that what you're committing to do is what you would have done anyway in paying the facilities director what you're paying him. The other is David's point about determining immediately that we need those 2 positions. I want him to have the resources he needs too. If that means 2 full-time people, fine. If it doesn't require 2 full-time people, I mean, you know, I would probably defer to Paul on this, but I know that David's talked to Tony about, you know, doing some cost analysis, and Kathy just presented us some information that would give me pause as to whether or not I really have to hire somebody full-time. But if I have to, I will. And as for paying for it in year 1, I mean, the general government side would, so it's year 1, we're gonna have to find the money to get through whatever, 120,000 or whatever it would be, plus a little bit more for, well, whatever, something in that range. Year 2, we create that separate
Right.
budget anyway.
Right.
So it's almost like you're doing the whole thing over again in year 2, just for the money. The organization has already existed for a year.
Right.
Right.
Right, so phase
Right.
1 is really building the organization and setting it up for success. And you know, and to be honest, we have a workable system. To be completely honest. We have a great facilities department, we have excellent management, okay? But if we're looking at this and efficiencies, because that is a term around here, the long-term efficiencies in this model is preventative maintenance, knowing what's going to break before it breaks, and being ahead of the curve,
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
That's not a cost analysis piece. That's not a straight one-to-one. Okay, so if we're building a system where we're going to be better in managing all the buildings in the town, and again, you know, Wellesley came in twice, it failed the first time because it was not set up correctly the first time. Okay?
No, I get-
So,
okay.
you know,
I'll support what you just said.
Right.
Except in my 32 years, to implement what you just said isn't always best done by employees. That's where the cost analysis is. To do all that you say that needs to be done, and I agree, you have to be more proactive. You can't wait for something to break to say, oh, we gotta take care of it. We don't have the people to do that now, nor are we set up to have contractors come in and do an analysis to say, hey, these roofs, you have a problem over at the
Right.
fire department roof that needs to be replaced. We
Right.
don't have to wait for a leak if we know what's coming down.
exactly. And
Whether it's
plan
done by
ahead.
an employee that's in place, or whether we have contracts set up to look at things proactively, that's an in-house decision that has to be made through an analysis that says, if you add up all the costs associated with doing preventive maintenance, is it cheaper to bring in someone in-house and do it, or do we have outside vendors to do that? I'm not disagreeing that this has to take place. I'm just disagreeing that we're gonna call out today
I
two
just
new
told you
salaries,
I'm
that's
willing
all.
to change
Okay.
that language.
So-
What I said is we need to
Right.
make sure we have adequate resources.
Right.
I don't think
I
we
don't know how
have the
to-
people at the table to make that decision. So
Well,
I
we certainly
think,
have the wording, we can word it correctly.
well, what I would suggest
Yep.
is that we say that in general, we agree with this general idea, that we have to call out specifically what each side will bring to the table for phase 1, and that we ask Dave to meet with Tony and Paul and tell us what language they think Paul would be comfortable with and what language Tony would be comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's,
Can I,
those are the right people that should be making that decision.
Right, and with only one of the three of them here,
yeah.
I think this is it.
Only one of them bothered to show up.
Decisions, I'm sure Tony will right
So can I just weigh in a little bit on the rest of the language then in that section 1?
Of course.
The annual review. I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. As you say, if it becomes superfluous someday, we say, okay, thank you.
Right.
You know, or have your annual reviews, they last 5 minutes and you're done.
Sure.
I would probably take any amendments to the MOU, make that a separate item at the very end of the whole thing. That's usually the way you do these things in constitutions. Any amendments must be approved by both the board. I would also probably put by majority votes of both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, but
Yeah.
as opposed to unanimous votes. Addendum for the first year should call out facilities manager will be housed at the Savage Center. It's kind of what I think we were thinking anyway, because you already have the office
think so,
space and
right.
everything,
We're
right?
just
So,
including,
I mean, if everybody agrees that we will have a building, some space up the street, and
Right, eventually, right.
if we all
Yeah.
would rather, you know, do it up real nice. If not, it seems to me the Savage Center would have made sense all along anyway.
Right.
The funding for, and then, so B and C then, we'll just kind of defer
B
for the
is
time
fine,
being.
B is fine.
The one thing we weren't sure about was what we wanted to call that position title. I put it in as administrative assistant, but maybe that's not the
It's
right
either gonna
title.
be,
I think it's business manager.
Yeah, I think it's maybe
I don't-
business
I don't know if
manager.
this chart
So you're
was
okay with the
updated,
B
so-
language?
I'm okay with B, we'll change admin to, I'm just gonna put business manager or business analyst, and let the rest of them, let Tony, Dave, and Paul decide
Okay,
what is the immediate need. And then
That'll
for
be the-
C, we'll
that'll
just
be
say
the-
Paul, Dave, and Tony to work out the language. Is that okay?
We make it clear to them, and David's here, he'll do it. The intention is to make, is to get the level of service we all envision here in the most effective way. As you made a good point, David, you really, by doing this, there are two concerns. One is that you have rapid and efficient response to needs, and two is that you do things cost effectively. They oftentimes go together, but they don't always go together. So it's, if you're calling a contractor and they're not available, but you're gonna save money by getting, well, we gotta wait 3 days, we can't wait 3 days.
Right.
You know, but we all know that from our own experience.
I will probably sit in on that conversation just so that I
But
can
the other
take the
thing
notes
too,
and make sure
the
we.
budget for FY '21, which is phase one, is being worked on, and things can be put together and brought in, and, you know, Kathy knows all that,
Mm-hmm.
where all this stuff is, and can be put.
Where the bodies are.
Yeah.
What other comments did you said you had?
No, that was, I mean, I don't know if you
On the
need a
MOU
motion.
itself, didn't you say that grammar?
Oh, yeah, I had some grammatical things.
All right, can you tell us?
Well, if you insist.
Because I would like to take a vote, that's why I want to make sure I got all your.
Well, can I just clarify one
Yes.
question for everyone? So the discussion that Dave and Paul and Tony are gonna have, what is the timeline for that happening? And then how is it getting into the MOU?
What I'm going to propose is that the four of us will work out the wording and include it in the MOU, along with 1, 2A, 2B. I will update this document.
We wouldn't need another meeting for that, would we? I mean,
Well, I'm just trying to plan, because so we meet on the 4th, and then
The
we
school
meet
committee
on
does.
the-
Oh, we definitely want it
sorry,
before then,
we meet
right?
I
on the
would like to
4th.
get it done before Thanksgiving so that
Yeah,
it comes
because
to you folks the first week of December.
If we can have it for the 4th.
I think if we sat down in 15 minutes, we could get it done. Shouldn't need more than 15, 20 minutes, Dave. I mean, we're close.
I've been drinking battery fluid, so I'm in a real difficult mood.
Okay, that's all. I think we're actually okay with C, it's just, to me, calling out exactly 2 new positions, so I understand what you need. We'll get the wording done.
One more conversation about it.
That's all. Yep.
I'll go along with what you want
What's,
to recommend on it.
what else you got, Tom, on here?
I mean, I'll email it if you want. I mean, just,
Well, just want them to hear it so that when.
all right, well, I mean, for example, line 2, we said all town facilities should be plural, should be facilities. Right there.
Oh.
Third paragraph down, third line, through
Yeah.
the department heads, plural, who, instead of that, occupy, the buildings, plural, and report to the general manager as opposed to reporting to the general manager.
Yep.
Down below, this here, the last paragraph in the first section, for the mutual promises set below, the BOS and the SC agree that the following will take place. I would simply say the BOS and the SC agree to the following conditions. I mean, it just seems like you don't need all those words, and it says the same thing more definitively. Under facilities, the next section, which is Facilities Management Department, item 1, the facilities director, delete for all municipal facilities. That's understood, I think, right here,
Yeah, the physical director for all municipal facilities.
as opposed to what other facilities director.
Oh, okay. True.
I had a question on number 3, but I think we just answered the F, as a building operation, so may staffing, but the plan must be agreed upon. Do we want to state by the superintendent and the, just want to clarify, the very last sentence on this first page, as building operations change, comma, so may staffing, comma, but the plan must be agreed upon.
Yep.
By whom? I mean, I think I know the answer, but do you want it spelled out?
Yes, I think we want it spelled out.
Okay.
By,
And even though I know the answer, why don't you tell me anyway?
it's going to be by Tony and Dave.
So superintendent and general manager, okay? Next, page number 4, I think the last word in that first paragraph should be precedence as opposed to precedent.
Yeah.
So take precedence. Item 6, you say the middle of the whole thing, the overall facilities management department budget. Do you want to just delete the word overall?
Yes.
Item 7, you put OT, I think you mean overtime, I'd spell it out.
Yeah.
Since, number 8, the general manager, school superintendent, human resources director appointed,
Just say facilities director.
and others that may be
Just say
designated shall work
facilities
collaboratively with all affected unions that may or will be affected, small thing, but I would say by the creation of a consolidated. Is that okay?
Affected by,
Instead of-
yes.
Yeah, instead of due to, I'd say it would be affected by the creation of a consolidated facilities department.
Okay.
It's an MOU at the sort of at the founding of things, so. And finally, number 9, question, the agreed upon annual FMD budget shall stand on its own. By the way, delete that.
The apostrophe.
The apostrophe.
There's no apostrophe in
No
it.
apostrophe there. I won't sign it if it's there. If there are budget
one of my pet
deficits.
peeves, too.
Me too. It drives me crazy, doesn't it? And people
No,
spelling the word
sometimes-
lose, L-O-S,
Sometimes
that drives me
it's
crazy.
automatic. I guarantee you, I did not put that.
Yeah.
That was,
That was really loosey-goosey, you know.
Yeah.
If there are budget deficits, the FMD will follow the standard procedure of transfers within, it should be its budget, again, ITS. Or, well, it should be actually his, I'm sorry, it's referring to a person, it should be his or her,
no.
as opposed to
Because
their.
it's
not
a
easy.
department.
It's
a
referring
budget.
to the budget.
Oh, then it's its, I'm sorry, then
Yeah.
it's budget, right. So the FMD refers to Facilities Management Department, not Facilities Management Director, right.
Yep.
It does in that, okay. Or request funding from the Finance Commission. I mean, I would just say request funding from other permissible sources. Does it,
You have
Yeah.
to go to town meeting.
if there are budget deficits, you don't, it's not, I mean, you could go to the Finance Commission for a reserve fund transfer,
Yes.
otherwise you're going to
But
town meeting,
in order to
right?
get additional money, even through an article, it's the Finance
No,
Commission.
no, you don't.
that-
No, you don't.
That presents it to town meeting.
I'm telling you, the Finance Commission can move indefinite postponement. I mean,
That's
we,
right.
but we can put the article on, the selectmen can put an article on that we want free cash, a free cash transfer.
Okay. So what's the word you want me to use?
So I just said, I mean, is it other permissible sources, or is it other sources? Do you need permissible in there?
It's fine.
Yeah. And then I think we would have a section 10, which would be about the annual review. And then section
Right.
11 would be any amendments to the MOU
Amendment
must be
procedure, yeah.
approved by a majority votes of both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee.
Okay, so 10 is annual review,
And
and
11 is
11
amendments.
is
So any
amendments.
amendments, that's number 11, where it starts with that sentence?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're just breaking out this
Yep,
paragraph
gotcha.
into two.
Yep.
I think
And
you're
then,
right, that the amendments clause is typically its own standalone thing.
So the
Yeah.
stuff before that will be somewhere above it.
Yeah, so,
2A, 2B, and then the wording of C will be
And that-
somewhere above it,
Right.
okay?
do we care where, it doesn't matter where it goes,
I don't
right?
think it
Just,
matters. I'll put them together.
I probably would put, actually, addendum for the first year, right? So this is going to be a long-standing document, then you should probably put that, if whatever we take from this 2 should probably be before annual, between 9 and 10.
Yep.
Yeah. Sure.
It's dealing with that first year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if that bank thing doesn't work out, we could probably find an English position.
I was a
Great
tough
start.
grader a long time ago.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to have a motion to approve as updated and
And condition?
in condition with final wording for 2C with Paul, Dave, Tony, and Dave.
So moved?
Second?
Any
I mean,
further
we
discussion?
have 4 voting members here. I'm with you and you,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Is that, yeah, I don't think you and I are voting members right now, so. We'll vote no, make it 4-2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would move it from the committee to now proceed with the school committee and the board of selectmen.
Yeah, so we didn't,
Or-
first, all in favor? All opposed,
Aye.
unanimous? Okay, that's okay. Right, so what I would like to do then is put together presentations or booklets that would go back to both the finance, well, you'll get a copy anyways, but for official votes, it would go to the school committee and the board of selectmen. And then ask for them to vote prior to the end of this year.
And I believe
to stay on
Tony
schedule.
mentioned that he felt that this decision had to be made by the end of
No,
December.
we agree.
Just for
We
the sake of the
agree.
budget
Yeah.
craft.
Right, we agree.
Right.
But
So-
it's,
I mean, it's really before town meeting, I think it has to be done, but.
Well, not if you want to get a good
budgeting
startup of,
Yeah.
Good
some of
budget
the
balancing,
stuff,
we
so,
start probably
yeah.
January.
Yeah.
so,
It'd be good if we had this put away.
right.
I was hoping we could start in June this year.
So is everyone okay if I put those together? And what I'll probably do is run it by you and run it by Paul, just to make sure that the books, that they're familiar with it before everyone gets one and say, what's this? You know, so, I mean, I've sort of prepped them that, I've talked to you and talked to lots of people about making sure that they know it's coming before the end of the year. I just don't want to, I'm not going to make it as thick as the book you had a year ago. It's really going to contain the MOU, the org chart, some of the service things and all the rest. And then we can talk through it at the meetings to make sure everyone feels comfortable with what we're doing. And the hope is that we're okay to
I
begin.
mean, I'd like to say that I think David's done a bang-up job. This is a great committee, and I think the product that'll go out of here will go to the selectmen and the school committee, will be very comprehensive, and as far as I am concerned, we are very, very lucky to have somebody like Paul, who's going to be able to take this over. I mean, if we had to hire somebody off the street, we would be in big trouble. And we've got to take the opportunity of his passion to want to do it. Whether it's, and that we should make sure this happens while Paul's still here.
I agree.
I know he's going to be here.
Before Paul retires. Not that,
Or it'd be funny if he gave his notice tomorrow. You know what, I'm going to Florida, I'll see you guys later, good luck with your department.
No,
David, are you wanting to come to our school committee meeting?
yes.
Okay.
I would like to at least be there to, if you have questions, I don't have to be the one to present. I mean, I can give you the books. It should be you folks that have represented your, the school committee all along. I would just be there to answer any questions, and if there's anything that you'd want me to take back to the board of selectmen, that's fine too, but I'm not looking to make any type
Just
of
want to
formal
be in the room when
presentation.
they have their meeting.
Yeah.
There might not
Just
be
for
any
reference
questions, it might be 5
Why not?
seconds, and they
There
vote
you
to
go.
approve, or if they
That's
have
fine.
questions, he's in the room. Call him forward.
Yeah,
If
that's
you
all.
don't need him, don't call him
So we meet
forward.
the 4th and the 16th, and I was hoping that we would get this done on the 4th, but
Okay.
that's really not that far away.
Well, if I can get
David
the,
said he'll have that.
I'll have this done within a week. It'll be, everything
Right,
else is
but-
already, believe it or not, I have it already printed up, just
Okay.
ready to put together.
Yeah, I'm just
Except
trying
this
to
document.
respect the protocols that we have within our committee.
Right,
And
and-
so with
and-
Thanksgiving, usually we get materials to everybody the Friday before, but with Thanksgiving, the next packets actually have to go out on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So that's why I was asking earlier, the timeline.
So this coming Tuesday,
Yeah.
if possible, you'd like to have, can you get it done? What do you think?
It's gonna be a little tight.
Today's Thursday, so we'd have to get together
Tomorrow.
Monday or tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow.
So how about
Maybe-
Monday?
maybe
Maybe
Monday.
Monday?
And Dave's already participated in the conversation, so you got a pretty good feel for it.
Okay.
Now,
So,
the school committee, you've been updating them.
Oh, yeah, we
all
talked
along.
about it last
Yeah.
night
And-
too, but
Yeah.
if they're getting updated information or a new packet, like,
Yeah.
I just want to respect the protocols that we have within our committee.
okay, so I'll have to get ahold of Tony to see what available time he has on Monday and run it by you to make sure you're free that, whatever time periods too, and then we'll, as I said, hope we can do it within 15 to 20 minutes.
People really like me, I'm usually booked a week or two
Sure,
out, so.
I know.
Well, you're gonna have to giddy up
I
now.
want coffee, want some burnt popcorn?
But yes, burnt popcorn, yes.
Not a problem.
Are we done?
I
Yeah,
believe
the only
you are,
reason I
unless
say
there's
that, I'm supposed to be at
it's a-
another meeting.
Any other questions? So, let's say this is barring a total collapse here, we're pretty much done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I
So-
think this group was worked very well together, trying to solve,
A lot of thoroughness. I'll
Yeah,
give
I know.
the members a lot of credit for being
all
very
want the same
thorough to
thing.
make sure that it was understood going forward how we're going to proceed, so I thank you. So I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second by somebody?
Second?
I don't think I can do that now.
All in favor, all opposed, unanimous. I thank you all very, very much.